Your liver is working right now, not just sitting there, but actively processing every single thing you've eaten today, filtering your blood, producing proteins your body needs to stay alive, and storing energy for later. It does this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without you ever thinking about it. And the state your liver is in right now, at this very moment, is one of the strongest predictors of whether you'll live to see your 80s in good health or whether chronic disease will catch up with you decades earlier. Liver health isn't just about avoiding cirrhosis or liver failure. It's about metabolic control, inflammation levels, cardiovascular risk, and ultimately how long you live and how well you age. Most people never think about their liver until something goes catastrophically wrong. But by then, the damage has often been building silently for years. What we now understand from metabolic research is that the liver sits at the center of nearly every major disease process that shortens lifespan. Heart disease, diabetes, stroke, dementia, even certain cancers all have metabolic roots that trace back to how well or how poorly your liver is functioning. And the thing that's driving liver dysfunction in most people isn't alcohol. It's sugar and processed food, creating a condition that didn't even have a name 50 years ago, but now affects nearly 1 in 3 adults in the developed world. Hi, I'm Dr. Alex. I'm an emergency medicine doctor, and after nearly a decade working in AANDE, I've seen what happens when preventable metabolic disease isn't prevented. My goal now is to help people avoid these outcomes in the first place and live longer, healthier lives. For the next few minutes, we're going to talk about what your liver actually does, why it breaks down, and most importantly, what that means for how long you're going to live. What your liver actually does. Before we can understand what goes wrong, we need to understand what the liver does when it's working properly. Your liver performs over 500 distinct metabolic functions. It's not one organ doing one job. It's a chemical factory running hundreds of processes simultaneously. Let me walk you through the critical ones that matter for longevity. First, glucose regulation. When you eat carbohydrates, they break down into glucose and enter your bloodstream. Your liver stores that glucose as glycogen and releases it back into circulation when blood sugar drops between meals. This keeps your brain fed, your energy stable, and prevents your blood sugar from swinging wildly up and down. Second, lipid metabolism. The liver packages fats into lipoproteins for transport around the body. It produces cholesterol, which despite its bad reputation is essential for cell membranes and hormone production. It also breaks down old cholesterol and excretes it through bile. Third, protein synthesis. Your liver produces albumin, which maintains blood pressure and fluid balance. It makes clotting factors that prevent you from bleeding uncontrollably from minor injuries. It synthesizes transport proteins that carry hormones and vitamins through the bloodstream. Fourth, detoxification. Every drug, every environmental toxin, every metabolic waste product gets processed by the liver. It converts ammonia from protein metabolism into urea, so it can be safely excreted by the kidneys. It breaks down old red blood cells and recycles the iron. It neutralizes toxins and packages them for elimination. Fifth, hormone clearance. Your liver clears excess estrogen, testosterone, cortisol, and insulin from the bloodstream. When the liver is overwhelmed or dysfunctional, these hormones accumulate, leading to metabolic imbalances that drive weight gain, mood disorders, and chronic disease. This is a tightly coordinated system. When it works, you don't notice it. When it starts to fail, the breakdown happens slowly and silently. You don't feel your liver struggling to clear insulin. You don't notice glycogen storage becoming impaired. You don't sense lipid metabolism going off track. But years later, the consequences show up as diabetes, as cardiovascular disease, as fatty liver disease, as metabolic syndrome. And by that point, reversing the damage is much harder than preventing it would have been. The rise of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. 50 years ago, liver disease was almost synonymous with alcoholism. If you didn't drink heavily, your liver was probably fine. That's no longer true. Today, the most common form of chronic liver disease in the Western world isn't caused by alcohol at all. It's called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NFLD. and it affects somewhere between 25 and 30% of adults in developed countries. Even more concerning, it's increasingly diagnosed in children and adolescents. This wasn't a diagnostic category that existed when your grandparents were young. It's a disease of modern food systems and modern metabolic dysfunction. So what exactly is NEFLD? It's the accumulation of fat inside liver cells. Not around the liver, but inside the hepatocytes themselves. Normally, the liver stores small amounts of fat temporarily as part of lipid metabolism. But when the liver is chronically overloaded with glucose and fructose, it starts converting those sugars into fat through a process called de novo lipogenesis. That fat gets deposited in the liver cells themselves, which impairs their function. In its early stages, NEFLD is just fatty infiltration. The liver still works reasonably well. Blood tests might be normal, you feel fine, but over time, that fat accumulation triggers inflammation, which leads to a more serious condition called non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, or NASH. This is where liver cells start dying, scar tissue begins to form, and the liver's ability to perform its essential functions declines. Left unchecked, NASH progresses to cirrhosis, liver failure, and hepatocellular carcinoma, which is liver cancer. But here's what makes this especially important for longevity. You don't have to progress to cirrhosis for fatty liver disease to kill you. NEFLD is independently associated with increased risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, chronic kidney disease, and all-cause mortality. The presence of excess liver fat predicts heart attacks and strokes even when cholesterol levels and blood pressure are normal. Why? Because fatty liver disease is a marker of profound metabolic dysfunction. It tells you that insulin resistance is advanced, that inflammation is chronic, and that the body's ability to regulate glucose and lipid metabolism has broken down. What drives fatty liver disease? So what causes the liver to start storing excess fat in the first place? The answer is chronic overconsumption of sugar, particularly fructose, combined with a sedentary lifestyle. Here's how it works mechanically. When you eat table sugar or high fructose corn syrup, you're consuming a 50-50 mix of glucose and fructose. Glucose gets absorbed and used by cells throughout the body. Muscle cells burn it for energy, the brain uses it for fuel. What's left over gets stored as glycogen in the liver and muscles. Fructose, on the other hand, is metabolized almost exclusively in the liver. It doesn't require insulin to enter liver cells, which sounds good initially, but it creates a problem. Because fructose bypasses the normal regulatory checkpoints that limit glucose metabolism, the liver processes it rapidly and aggressively. When fructose enters the liver, it's phosphorylated into fructose 1-phosphate. Unlike glucose metabolism, which is tightly controlled, fructose metabolism proceeds unregulated. The liver converts it into acetyl-CoA, which is then used to synthesize fatty acids. Those fatty acids get packaged into triglycerides and either exported as VLDL particles or stored inside the liver itself. This is de novo lipogenesis, the creation of new fat from sugar. And when you consume fructose chronically, in the amounts present in modern ultra-processed diets, the liver can't export fat fast enough to keep up with production. The result is fat accumulation inside hepatocytes. But fructose does something else that makes the problem worse. It generates uric acid as a byproduct of its metabolism. Elevated uric acid has been shown in multiple studies to impair insulin signaling, increase inflammation, and promote fat storage in the liver. It also reduces nitric oxide availability, which impairs vascular function and raises blood pressure. So fructose isn't just providing raw material for fat synthesis. It's chemically altering the liver's metabolic environment in ways that lock in dysfunction. Insulin resistance amplifies the problem. When cells become resistant to insulin, the pancreas compensates by producing more insulin to achieve the same blood sugar control. Chronically elevated insulin levels tell the liver to keep making fat and to hold on to the fat it's already storing. At the same time, insulin resistance means that muscle cells aren't taking up glucose efficiently, so more glucose ends up being processed by the liver and converted into fat. It's a vicious cycle. High insulin promotes fat storage. Fat storage worsens insulin resistance. Insulin resistance drives insulin levels even higher, And the liver sits at the center of this metabolic trap, the connection to longevity. So why does this matter for how long you live? Because fatty liver disease accelerates nearly every aging process that shortens lifespan. Let's start with cardiovascular disease, which remains the #1 cause of death in the developed world. Fatty liver disease is strongly associated with atherosclerosis, the buildup of plaque in the arteries that leads to heart attacks and strokes. Even after adjusting for traditional risk factors like high cholesterol, high blood pressure, smoking, and diabetes, people with NAFLD have significantly higher rates of cardiovascular events. The mechanism is multifaceted. First, the liver exports triglyceride-rich VLDL particles into the bloodstream. These particles promote the formation of small, dense LDL cholesterol, which is far more atherogenic than large, fluffy LDL. Second, fatty liver disease is associated with chronic low-grade inflammation, which destabilizes arterial plaques and makes them more likely to rupture. Third, insulin resistance impairs endothelial function, reducing nitric oxide production and preventing arteries from dilating properly. The result is stiffer, narrower blood vessels that are more prone to clot formation and less able to respond to changes in blood flow. Then there's diabetes. Fatty liver disease and type 2 diabetes are so tightly linked that they're often considered two manifestations of the same underlying metabolic disorder. The liver plays a central role in blood sugar regulation. In a healthy metabolic state, the liver releases glucose into the bloodstream during fasting periods and suppresses glucose release after meals in response to insulin. But in insulin-resistant states, the liver keeps releasing glucose even when blood sugar is already elevated. This is called hepatic glucose overproduction, and it's one of the key drivers of fasting hyperglycemia in type 2 diabetes. People with NAFLD have roughly a 2.5-fold increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes compared to those without fatty liver. And diabetes, in turn, dramatically shortens lifespan by increasing the risk of heart disease, kidney failure, neuropathy, blindness, and infections. Fatty liver disease is also linked to chronic kidney disease. The liver and kidneys work closely together to regulate metabolic waste products, fluid balance, and blood pressure. When the liver is dysfunctional, it places additional strain on the kidneys. Elevated uric acid from fructose metabolism damages kidney filtration cells. Insulin resistance promotes sodium retention, which raises blood pressure and forces the kidneys to work harder. Chronic inflammation from fatty liver disease accelerates the decline in kidney function over time. People with NAFLD have roughly double the risk of developing chronic kidney disease, which itself is associated with significantly increased mortality. There's also emerging evidence linking fatty liver disease to cognitive decline and dementia. The liver clears metabolic waste products and toxins from the bloodstream. When liver function is impaired, these substances accumulate and can cross the blood-brain barrier, contributing to neuroinflammation and neuronal damage. Insulin resistance, which is central to fatty liver disease, is also strongly associated with Alzheimer's disease. Some researchers now refer to Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes because of the profound overlap in metabolic dysfunction. People with NAFLD have higher rates of cognitive impairment and faster rates of cognitive decline as they age. And finally, there's cancer. Fatty liver disease increases the risk of hepatocellular carcinoma, which is primary liver cancer. But the association extends beyond the liver. NAFLD is also linked to increased risk of colorectal cancer, pancreatic cancer, breast cancer, and several other malignancies. The mechanisms likely involve chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, and hormonal imbalances driven by liver dysfunction. The bottom line is this: fatty liver disease isn't just a liver problem. It's a systemic metabolic disorder that accelerates aging and increases the risk of nearly every major chronic disease that shortens lifespan. If you want to live longer and maintain functional independence into your 70s and 80s, protecting your liver is not optional. It's essential. Now, if you're finding this video helpful and you want to learn more about how to prevent the diseases I see in the emergency department every single day, then please consider subscribing to this channel. I promise to keep creating content grounded in science and the latest research to help you live longer, healthier lives. And all I ask in return is that you give this fairly new channel a chance and hit the subscribe button. If you get to the end of this video and you didn't think it was worth your time, then feel free to unsubscribe. No hard feelings. But if you give me your time and attention, I'll give you everything I've learned from over a decade in medicine. So please help me reach more people like you by subscribing. And let's continue with the video. How to reverse fatty liver disease. The good news is that fatty liver disease is reversible, especially in its early stages. The liver has remarkable regenerative capacity. If you remove the factors driving fat accumulation and inflammation, the liver will heal itself. Let's talk about what actually works. First and most importantly, reduce fructose intake. This means cutting out sugar-sweetened beverages, which are the single largest source of added fructose in most people's diets. Soft drinks, fruit juices, energy drinks, sweetened teas, all of them deliver massive fructose loads that get processed directly by the liver. Eliminating these alone can lead to significant reductions in liver fat within weeks. It also means reducing consumption of foods with added sugars. Breakfast cereals, flavored yogurts, granola bars, sauces, condiments, baked goods, read ingredient labels. If sugar, high fructose corn syrup, agave nectar, or any other sweetener is listed in the first 3 ingredients, it's a problem food for your liver. Second, reduce refined carbohydrate intake. White bread, white rice, pasta, pastries, crackers. These foods spike blood sugar and insulin, which tells the liver to convert excess glucose into fat. Replacing refined carbs with whole foods, vegetables, legumes, and moderate amounts of whole grains flattens the blood sugar response and reduces insulin demand. Third, increase protein intake, particularly from whole food sources. Protein has the highest satiety value of any macronutrient, meaning it keeps you full longer and reduces overall calorie intake. It also requires more energy to digest and metabolize, which slightly increases your metabolic rate. Lean meats, fish, eggs, dairy, legumes aim for roughly 1.6 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight daily if you're trying to lose visceral fat and improve liver health. Fourth, exercise regularly. Physical activity improves insulin sensitivity, meaning your cells respond better to insulin and your pancreas doesn't have to produce as much. It also directly reduces liver fat, independent of weight loss. Studies have shown that regular aerobic exercise can reduce liver fat by 10 to 20%, even in people who don't lose significant amounts of weight. Resistance training is also beneficial because it builds muscle mass, and muscle is one of the primary sites where glucose is stored and burned. More muscle means better glucose disposal and less glucose being converted to fat in the liver. Fifth, lose visceral fat if you're carrying excess weight. Visceral fat, the fat stored around internal organs, is metabolically active and produces inflammatory cytokines that worsen insulin resistance and promote fat accumulation in the liver. Losing even 5 to 10% of your body weight can lead to significant reductions in liver fat and improvements in liver enzyme levels. The most effective way to lose visceral fat is through calorie restriction, combined with the dietary changes I've already mentioned. You don't need to starve yourself. Moderate calorie deficits sustained over months are more effective and more sustainable than aggressive crash diets. Sixth, avoid alcohol. Even moderate alcohol consumption can worsen fatty liver disease and accelerate its progression to cirrhosis. If you already have NAFLD, the safest approach is complete abstinence. If you're trying to prevent it, keeping alcohol consumption low, ideally below 7 units per week, reduces the additional burden on your liver. Seventh, prioritize sleep. Poor sleep worsens insulin resistance, increases appetite, and promotes fat storage. Aim for 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep per night. Fix sleep apnea if you have it, as it's strongly associated with fatty liver disease and metabolic dysfunction. What I see in emergency medicine, in the emergency department, I don't see fatty liver disease as a primary presentation. People don't come in complaining about elevated liver enzymes. They come in with chest pain from a heart attack. They come in with sudden weakness from a stroke. They come in with uncontrolled blood sugars and diabetic ketoacidosis. They come in with confusion from advanced liver failure, and when we investigate, we find that the underlying process has been building for years. Fatty liver disease sits quietly in the background, driving insulin resistance, promoting inflammation, accelerating atherosclerosis. By the time symptoms appear, the damage is often advanced and much harder to reverse. What frustrates me is how preventable this is. The patients I see with metabolic disease, with diabetes, with cardiovascular complications, most of them could have avoided it by addressing liver health and metabolic dysfunction years earlier. Not through medication, but through simple, sustainable changes in diet and lifestyle. The problem is that our food environment makes those changes difficult. Ultra-processed foods are cheap, convenient, heavily marketed, and engineered to be hyper-palatable. They're everywhere, and they're killing people slowly through metabolic disease. Fatty liver disease is just one manifestation of a broader crisis in metabolic health. But it's a useful marker because it tells you that the system is breaking down. If you have fatty liver disease, it means insulin resistance is advanced. It means inflammation is chronic. It means your risk of diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and early death is significantly elevated. Final thoughts. So where does this leave us? Your liver is one of the most important organs in your body when it comes to longevity. It regulates glucose, processes fats, clears toxins, produces essential proteins, and maintains metabolic balance. When it's functioning well, you're protected against many of the chronic diseases that shorten lifespan. When it's dysfunctional, your risk of diabetes, heart disease, stroke, kidney disease, dementia, and cancer all increase significantly. Fatty liver disease is the clearest sign that liver health is breaking down, and it's overwhelmingly driven by excess sugar, particularly fructose, combined with refined carbohydrates and a sedentary lifestyle. The good news is that it's reversible. Cutting out sugar-sweetened beverages, reducing refined carbs, increasing protein, exercising regularly, losing visceral fat, and prioritizing sleep can all lead to dramatic improvements in liver health within months. This isn't about perfection, it's about consistency. Small, sustainable changes maintained over time produce far better results than extreme interventions that can't be sustained. Your liver will regenerate if you give it the chance, but you have to remove the factors driving the damage. If you want to live into your 80s and 90s with your health intact, protecting your liver is one of the most important things you can do. It's not glamorous, it doesn't involve supplements or biohacks. It's just eating real food, moving your body, and sleeping properly. But the payoff, measured in years of healthy life, is enormous. And finally, if you found this video useful, please subscribe to help this channel reach more people like you. I'll keep creating content to help you prevent disease and live longer, healthier lives. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.